Off with her introduction, I do want to introduce myself because I'm not on a slide. My name is Georgia Elise Casanova. I'm the program assistant for New Haven Promise. I've been working at New Haven Promise for approximately 6 years now. I went to New Haven Public Schools, went to Truman for middle school, went to Metropolitan Business Academy right here for high school, and then Albertus Magnus for college. And let's see, what's it? I got my degree in sociology, criminal justice, and a Spanish minor. And I currently work for New Haven Promise and have been since I got into college. I'll hand it over to Brittany. So I'm going to be mainly I am going to be the pilot, but Brittany has the coordinates.
So my name is Brittany Palmer. I am a New Haven Promise scholar. I grew up in the Dwight neighborhood, so right around where Troop School is. I spent most of my life in that neighborhood and kind of on the outskirts of that as well. I went to Betsy Ross for middle school. I focused in tap dancing and, messed around with the other arts as well. And then I graduated from there and went off to James Ellis High School. It's not on the PowerPoint, but I also did ECA in the afternoons as a vocal student. And then I went off to the University of New Haven and I received a bachelor's in theater arts and a bachelor's in political science. And then my next steps are first going to get my master's in theater studies and then going on to get a PhD in theater history, focusing on Latinx and African American studies.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Layton Chang Salazar. I'm also a New Haven Promise scholar. I was born and raised in the Fairhaven neighborhood, so I'm still here. I did graduate back from middle school at Daniels, or John C. Daniels. I also went to high school at Cooperative Arts and Humanities High School. I'm currently at the University of Bridgeport, ready to graduate. I do major in criminal justice, human security with a concentration in criminology, and I also minor in psych. So my next steps are, again, for graduation. I will be, at some point, attending grad school, specifically for forensic psychology, hopefully getting later on a PhD in and a little bit in advance of forensic psychology and clinical mental health to eventually become a behavioral analysis for the FBI.
So we actually have another Promise scholar. She'll be on her way here. Her name is Naija Marcado. She's also from the Fairhaven neighborhood, graduated from Wilbur Cross in 2011. She earned a bachelor's degree in public health from Southern Connecticut State University, and she's currently attaining a master's in higher education counseling. Her focus is middle school, college prep, and supporting students through their college experience as well. The good news is college preparation can start at any age and can be framed by implementing behaviors that scholarships will require. This is for the financial aspect. And New Haven Promise is a great example. So I'm going to touch on New Haven Promise and then I'm going to hand it off to Brittany to take over. So New Haven Promise is a scholarship for students who live in New Haven and go to New Haven schools. So we have specific criteria. One of them is that the student be a resident of New Haven. The longer, the more benefit. But at least they're, do you want to help me pass this on? At least for the entire high school career. So once they get to high school, it's the essential time. That's one of the requirements for our scholarship going to full gear. So I know that your son is going to be going to Notre Dame. It's not an eligible school for New Haven Promise, but I have tons of other resources, and that is a very strong college prep school. They're going to make sure that whatever college he goes to will be a financially smart college. So besides living in New Haven and going to a New Haven school for at least your entire high school career, we ask students to miss no more than 90% of school, so no more than 72 absences in high school, all 4 years. And that starts so much early on. Brittany's going to touch on that. Community service, 40 hours of community service at a nonprofit in New Haven. I really highlight the importance of it being a nonprofit in New Haven because we have students, Brittany and I, have students this last couple of weeks who our seniors have applied to our scholarship and haven't gotten their community service done at an eligible organization or at all, and it is jeopardizing their scholarship. So I've had students where I had to sit down with them and say, listen, I know you did community service being the audio person at your church during service. It is not community service. That's volunteerism. Volunteerism and community service are two different things.
Oh, it's separate?
Yes, volunteering, because you want to volunteer, go ahead. Community service for New Haven Promise, nonprofit organization in the city of New Haven. So we really elaborate on that because it's supposed to be for the greater good of the community and not something that's of self-interest to the student. It's great to pair, you know, if you're someone who loves animals, to go volunteer at the New Haven shelter, that'll work. They're a nonprofit organization. But when you're doing it because, you know, your church wants you to do the audio, visual, and you're just doing it for the heck of it, and it's not going to count for New Haven Promise.
And then just to emphasize the importance of community service too, beyond just it being a requirement for scholarships or even just your school, those experiences are what's going to fuel the material for your students' college essays or essays they have to write for scholarships or any program they're trying to get into. Those are the experiences where they'll really get a story they can tell that shows who they are as a human being, not just as an academic. So it's important to do something that they're passionate about that also serves the greater community.
Yeah, and colleges, in the college application, they'll ask the student, what are your activities, extracurricular activities? Do you have a resume? And in that resume, if there's someone who hasn't worked, should be their community service and their involvement with an organization. So sometimes students don't want to do it, but that's the reason why. And it gives them that really good experience that they need to learn how to be employees at some point. The best time to do the community service is in the lower grades. Once they get to their senior year, no one wants to be doing community service. I am thinking about launching into college. I'm thinking about prom. I'm thinking about making sure I can pay for college. My mom is thinking about making sure she can pay for college, but she wants to make sure that I look good for prom too. So no one wants to be talking about I need to go do 3 hours of community service their senior year. And then the GPA is a 3.0 B average. We're going to talk about understanding how to get that GPA to where it needs to be, even if the student doesn't hit the ground running in high school. So you can have a rough high school year, but first year, and you can just pick it up the next 3 years. Yes.
What are the requirements for the number of hours for community service?
40.
Oh, wow.
So it's even, the way they did it back then was evenly 10 per year, but we've noticed that seniors don't want to do community service their senior year, so we encourage the students to get 20 done their freshman year and 20 done their sophomore year. And that way, junior year is all about prep, and senior year is all about action. I have metaphors, a lot of metaphors. You'll notice. All right, Brittany.
So now for this part of the presentation, we're going to break down what it is you can be doing per grade group. This shows a great timeline of how to push your student into being college ready. Starting with the kindergarten through 5, it's really about attendance. Get them used to being in school, get them used to being dedicated to their classes. That way they're comfortable with it, because when they get older, like I see this in my little sister now, she doesn't want to go to school. And if you get them used to the idea of it already, they'll have that sense of attendance is important because I can't get my education unless I'm there. And they'll already have a sense of being comfortable being in a classroom. And then that goes on to college as well. And the stakes are higher in college. If I miss a class in college, you know, when I average it out being at UNH, I'm missing out on $90 that I gave the school already, so I'm losing out on money. You know, and the same thing when it comes to work. That is a dedication about attendance. You're setting your child up to really be ready for life in general. The more you get them to say, okay, 5 days a week I'm dedicated to this place. The same way they would be dedicated to school, the same way they'll be dedicated to work down the line. For 6 to 8, that's when you really want to focus on getting them to understand the importance of keeping their grades up, because that's when they'll really build that core of what their importance on learning really is. Waiting until they're in high school to push them to say, you know, you need to push to get an A or push to get a B or push to get all your work done. It's a little late by then. You really want to make sure that in that middle school range they really understand why it's important to push for that A or push for the B and get their work done. Because by high school, so many other factors are added into it that it's hard to teach them that. And then, as we were saying, 9 through 11, more so 9 to 10, you want to focus on that community service, or even starting a little earlier with this idea of being a helper, even if it's just helping around the house, helping around with chores, helping someone in their neighborhood. But that's something we'll get into a little bit deeper as we break down each side as well. And then of course your seniors, you want to have all that other stuff locked in so that you can focus on the college decision and really making sure that you're having a full conversation about, yes, you can pick this school because you like what you saw on the internet or you like that your friend is going there, but you need to pick what's best for you, not just academically, but also financially. So you want to be able to set them up to have that financial conversation by their senior year. And then we'll get into the idea of if it's time for you to just let them go and be free when it comes to college. So as I said, with K through 5, we want to focus on attendance. But then there's other little things that you can do that makes you a bit more of an active parent in their learning process as well, which is, reading with them, encouraging them to read. A lot of schools already require that students read at least maybe 10 or 15 pages a night. Showing that dedication to books, even if you bring them to the local library on the weekend, so they already have an affinity for reading because they're going to have to do it. And if they don't get used to the idea of reading a book and finding joy in it, or at least finding it to be something that is necessary for their growth, it's going to be hard when they get to middle school and high school and definitely college, where you have to read an entire book in less than a week. Playing with them, getting them to be active. Educational games are really important. My mom was really invested in my intelligence as a baby. Everything was about my development of my mind and my learning style. She always found ways that worked best for me versus what works best for other students. Singing to me, because that worked. Music was a big thing for me. Singing my alphabet, the spelling of my name. Anything that gets you to engage in what their learning style is, to support them at home, because they only get so many hours at school during the week. It really solidifies when they're at home. If they see that it's important to get their homework done at home, then they're going to be a bit more studious when it comes to the classroom. If it lacks at home, it's going to lack in the classroom as well.
And then, if I may, so one of the things that I'm going to add is resources. New Haven Reads gives a lot of free books to students of all ages, and there's a great reading program that partners with the district, and they attend a lot of the community fairs. They're not here today because it's a parent university, but if you go to a fair offered by the district, you'll see that they have organizations there, such as the New Haven Free Public Library. That's a chance and a free opportunity to kick these. The playing with them, this is how you get to know what kind of child you have. I have a very bright child that gets bored after he catches on. So the moment that I notice that, I let his teachers know, hey, listen, he might already know a lot of the stuff that you're teaching him, so I want to supplement his instruction here. I want to supplement it. If you see him getting distracted, it's because he is bored, and you're probably teaching him the ABCs, which he already knows, and you're probably teaching animals, which he already knows, and colors and things like that he already knows. And he'll follow with you guys for a while, but after he's done and he's absorbed it, you've lost his attention. And kids have a very short attention span, very short. So if you don't notice that your child isn't entertained in school early on, you're not able to establish a plan with your teachers every single year as he transitions, because they need to know your individual student. There is a classroom of students, but every single class has a few students that need something different, and it's okay if that's your child. Sorry.
That's okay. That is okay. That's why we are all here just for and then that idea of being a little helper. I remember being in preschool and kindergarten, and I can still remember the cleanup song. And that stuff is important because it teaches you responsibility in the environment that you're in, because you're going to need to be responsible for your home environment, your academic environment, and your work environment as well. You have to clean up everywhere you go, or at least offer some sort of assistance so that you are part of the greater good for that area. And then that also sets them up to be ready to do things like community service, so they understand the importance of helping other people. It's like, helping mommy in the kitchen, or helping mommy by making sure your room is clean. Even if they're too little to really clean something by themselves, teaching them to clean up the little cereal that they spilled up by getting them a little broom or something. Like, things like that are really important because it builds into something bigger later. 6 through 8, I mean, most kids get chores a little earlier on, like cleaning up their toys, but 6 through 8 is when you really want to solidify what that list of chores is. It's like my little sister, she started washing dishes by the time she was in middle school. I was washing dishes a little earlier than that, but at least it becomes their chore, so they know that this is what I have to do, and it builds that work ethic. So that when it's time to let them go and let them fly a little bit so they can be a bit more independent, they already have that ingrained in them that it's just like, I have to make sure I get this done and I have to do it well. Grade tracking is really important by the time they get to middle school. Kids get really annoyed when mom is asking them or dad is asking them or whoever their guardian is asking, did you get your work done? Did you hand in this paper? I saw this on Power School. It's really important to get savvy with Power School. So that you can really track what their attendance is, track how their grades are going, whether or not they're completing their assignments, and what kind of grades they're getting on them. Because by the time they get to high school, it's like you're still going to be tracking a little bit, but you want them to understand the importance of making sure that their grades are in the right place. Like we said before, you know, on average you want to steer towards that 3.0 or higher, because that's what will help you financially later down the line with getting some sort of funding for college. And then that educational responsibility, which comes with the grade tracking, is like, you know, whatever work they do is their work. It's like mommy, daddy, grandma, auntie, whoever it is that's at home with you when you're doing your work, even if it's just a tutor that's at home with you, they may be there to help you, but you have to take ownership of what your work looks like. If you got an A, take ownership of the fact that you got an A. If you got a D, you need to take ownership of the fact that you got a D, because I'm not in the classroom, or whoever that person is not in the classroom to make sure that you are taking in the knowledge that you need. So you have to be responsible in that sense, to know that what I do is what I'm going to get out of it. Because that when you get to college, whoever was there when you were in grade school is not going to be there to do the work for you either.
And so this is the foundation for good habits, good educational habits that will go with them even to the workplace. So these are things that you can instill early on the student.
And then the high school breakdown too is with between 9 and 11, that's, like we said, you want to get into that community service, probably push it early on so they can get it out of the way. I remember I got all of my community service hours done my freshman year of school, because by the time I got to sophomore year, I was hitting the ground running with a lot of things and I did not have time for it. So it's really best to get them pushed on that early, because they won't have as many things that they're committed to as they go along. Like I said, keeping up with the grade tracking, but making sure that they're taking responsibility in the classroom too. If they miss work because they were out sick, make sure that they're the ones going to the teacher to ask for it. You know, they have, because when they get to college, you can't do it. And if they decide they're going to stay in Connecticut, even if they're, you know, upstate from you, you can't drive up every other day when they're sick and go to their professors. The professor's not going to talk to you anyway, because they're the one in the class. But yeah, make sure they're taking charge of what is going into their academics. If they can, get them a little part-time job around the community service too, because it teaches them that economic responsibility. You know, let them earn their little money to get the stuff that they want, or save it up for those little fees that pop up when college comes up. Because everyone looks at the big bill of what tuition is like, but then there's like, if you're going to be a commuter, there's a $300 fee that a lot of schools are going to ask you to pay to commit to being there, or $500, or even more, or books. Those things add up, and they come up out of nowhere, and you don't know what your book prices are going to be until you get your class schedule. You don't know if you're paying $300 this semester or $30. So, you know, teaching them the importance of putting their money aside and managing for the things that they need, not just what they want, is really important. My mom.
I wanted to add on here, college choice time. When should college visits happen? College visits should be happening as early as possible. 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th, 11th. By the time your student gets to their summer, before senior year, they should have a list of the colleges they should be thinking about applying to. They should have their drafted personal statements already, which is the essay that they're submitting to the school. They should have a sense of where they are academically, where's their GPA, how their attendance. These are things that will be huge determining factors when they get to that senior year and they're applying to colleges, because they need to know what their GPA, their grades are. They need to know their essays need to be finished, because there might be a huge cohort of seniors at that school. Hill House has a huge class. Cross has a huge class. And we don't know whether they're going to be able to make it into the guidance counselor's office multiple times. They might make it once or twice in their senior year, but they're not gonna make it every single time, especially at the larger schools. So that independence happens. It hits some of the students hard their senior year, but if you're doing all of these things every year, teaching them that responsibility and the chores and how to manage their time, that independence transition will be much easier. They'll be able to track their own things much more easily. And it'll create less of a rough transition when they're in their senior year and they have to figure all of this out. Same for you. You'll be ready for that transition. You'll say, okay, I'm good. Things you should do to prepare. Get tech savvy. Technology runs the world nowadays. You need an email for yourself and a separate email for your student. I know New Haven Public Schools give students an email. It is not for outside use. It is only for in-school use. Guidance counselors, administrators, district people. It's like when you get those phone calls, those phone calls, their system is only for you. This email system is only for your student within the school. Free email addresses can be created, something that's going to stick with you. I have had seniors who have applied and their parents still haven't authorized their application and it jeopardized their application. It's a simple 2-minute online sign-in. They type their name, they type the date, they press submit. I have students whose scholarship application didn't go through because their parent couldn't find the email. Their parent couldn't access their email. You should have one solid email that follows you wherever you go that you can use for all of these things, and have a folder that says your child's name on it. That's what I do. I have a folder that at one moment said baby and now says Noel. So that's my son's name. So that everything for him is in there. And then I have a folder that says Noel school. His academic stuff go in there. So I have 2 folders, one for personal stuff for him and one for academics. And that email I will use for the rest of my life. It is an email that I've had for as long as I can imagine. And I already created an email for him that I manage. So when he turns 14, I'll give him that email. This is where all your stuff is for school. And I've already created a school, a work, and a money folder in there. It's over preparing, but he's going to learn how to do it one way or another. And I am going to force him to learn how to do it. Because I need to make sure that he's going to be okay when I can't do it. So, improving your computer skills. There are free computer access and training provided at the local library. It'll really help develop your skills. Exposure means everything. How do you learn how to use Facebook if you've never been on Facebook? You got to go get on Facebook and use Facebook. So you take advantage of the free technology training sessions offered throughout the city so that you can understand one important thing: how to use your email properly, how to check your spam folder, because sometimes if someone is not someone who's been in contact with you and they send you an email, like your student registers for New Haven Promise for the first time and we send you an email and it goes into your spam or junk, you never get that notification. You don't even know to look in your spam or junk. So you got to go into your spam or junk folder in your email and add us to your contact list so that whenever we send you an email again, you'll get it into your inbox, not to your spam or junk. So these are things that those basic computer tech courses that are being offered around show you. Local food chains have free Wi-Fi, but free Wi-Fi is very common in a lot of the households, so I don't see that being a major problem. But the more you get on and try to figure out how to do things, and since you have younger children, this is the best time to ask them how to do something. Because when they get into high school, they're going to be like, oh my God, Mama can't do nothing. She can't do nothing on a computer. And then they're like, I'll do it. And you tell them, no, you don't do it, I'll do it. I need to learn this. So this is the best time to ask them for all those little questions about your email, setting up your Power School. It is so important. The other thing is the FAFSA, free financial aid for free federal aid for free application for federal student aid. There you go. If you do the FAFSA electronically, which is how students get federal aid when they're applying to college, it is 1 to 2 weeks off processing time. If you do it by paper, it can be less accurate, it can take longer to correct, it can take longer to process. So if your application on paper takes 3 to 6 weeks, and the one online takes 2 to 5 weeks, your student, if you do it on paper, if they get it on the 6th week and someone got it on the 2nd week, is already missing out on financial aid. on that free money. So I'm going to tell you about the FAFSA very quickly. And best things to do now, pledge your student now. If your student is eligible for New Haven Promise, meaning you're a New Haven resident and they're in a New Haven school, you can register them now. Parents can register students K through 5. There's a little flyer that I passed out. On the bottom of it says pledge now, app.newhavenpromise.org. You can sign up your student. If they're 6th grade and above, they can sign up themselves. They need your email, their own email, that's not the New Haven Public School one, and their lunch code, which they all know because they want to get lunch at school. And it's connected to their school email.
Parents
So,
and community collaborators, in 4 minutes at 10:30, we will be changing into the second section of workshops. Thank you.
I know. Track their grades on Power School. If you're not familiar with Power School, get savvy. Figure out if your school can do a training session for the parents. These are things that are easily organizable with the PTO at the school, or with the principal. Listen, hey, we have parents who don't even know how to log into Power School. We need to do a training to log into Power School, and we need to know how frequently is Power School going to be updated for our students. File your taxes. Even if you owe, you can still file your taxes. You don't have to pay at that moment, but you should file them. I have seniors who can't get financial aid from the school because their parents haven't done their taxes for 2-3 years. Get your taxes. Yeah. But we do have students, and one of the things is New Haven Promise works with undocumented and DACA students, so we are able to tell the students what they need to do for their parents to be on their FAFSA, but they won't be penalized because they're undocumented or DACA. So there is a way to do it, and there is a way to file the taxes if they have a state identification number or a tax ID. So there are ways to get it done. It's just a little complex for our undocumented and DACA students. But anybody else who has the ability to do their taxes and not done it should do it. Because when you get to senior year and you haven't done your taxes for 2, 3, or more years, your student's not getting financial aid, and you're going to have to pay for their education until you do your FAFSA.
Like, you want to be able to know that when it comes to FAFSA, they cannot do it by themselves. They can't just submit their own application. Your information goes with them until they file their own taxes independently and not be counted as a dependent.
So, and if a student's independent, they need to be independent students for at least 2 years before they can be taken out the FAFSA. Even if it's not legally, the parent can claim them for 2 years in the taxes if they're suddenly an independent student. So federal student aid comes from the federal government, U.S. Department of Education. It's money that helps students pay for educational expenses. Some of them, like grants, you don't need to pay back. But some of them, like the loans, you do need to pay back. In 2020, DACA and undocumented students will be eligible for institutional aid. So the institutional aid is a form of grants from the school, not from the federal government. The federal government gives the Pell, which is this year is up to $6,100 per year for a student who meets the criteria, but it can go as low as $0 for a student who doesn't meet the criteria, and it is income-based, the Pell. SEOG is an additional grant given to students who are absolutely of major need, and a student can receive both. I did receive both because my family size and the income is below the poverty line. So I qualify for Pell and SEOG. And there are students who might qualify for Pell but not SEOG because they're not a major need. So there is free money out there besides scholarships. Loans, direct subsidized, the interest accumulates as this, after the student is not in school for 6 months. So they need to be registered at least part-time so that the interest doesn't accumulate on this loan if they take it. It's the most common one that's taken because of the flexibility of it. Unsubsidized, the interest accumulates all along. So if the student gets to their freshman year and they graduate senior year of college, then that loan has been accumulating interest for 4 years. Direct plus loan is if your loans, you need more money. I try to avoid direct plus loans because they need to be paid right after you take them out. There's no break from those. So you need to pay them before you register for the next semester, which is why a lot of our students, when they have high incomes and they don't understand this loan, they are unable to register in the spring semester because that loan hasn't been paid off for a fall semester. Federal Perkins loan is a private loan given to students. It's less common now because it's given through the universities. FAFSA, free application, always opens on October 1st of the student's senior year. Always. The priority deadline, because there's no final deadline until June for the FAFSA, but the priority deadline is always in early February. So after the student files after that early February date, they might not have any more institutional aid to give. So if your student has high grades, get in that FAFSA early, because if they don't get that presidential scholarship early enough, and everybody else, they've already awarded the university grants for that year, and your student applies for FAFSA after February, that leadership grant may not be there anymore. They probably would have run out of money by then, which is not uncommon. The first step to that is to file your taxes every single year. Any questions so far about the FAFSA? It is a long and lengthy online application, and you must have your taxes with you when you're doing it, and you must have your social security number with you when you're doing it, or your tax ID number.
Can I just ask a question? It says here, FAFSA opens October 1st. Let's say October 1st of
Their senior year.
their senior year.
Yeah.
So if they're senior, that would have been last October.
Yes.
And then, but then which taxes are looked at? The one
Prior year. So they will be willing to accept the year before's taxes.
So that would have been
Yeah, and then
2017 because.
yeah, and then what you do is you'll update it later on down the road, because you want to meet that priority deadline. You got to use your prior years, because you're not gonna have your current year taxes ready. But you can then go back in and update it, and they'll just confirm that what you said is okay. And unless you've had a drastic change in your income between 2017, for example,
Right.
2017 and 2018, usually the financial aid packages stay the same. University grants don't change because a lot of them are academic based, not need based. But there are sometimes some need based university grants. So you'll want to make sure when you're reviewing the financial aid package with the student that you're looking at it, asking, is the scholarship removable, and is it need based or not?
So really quickly, we'll go over some options that you can have to be able to afford.
Can we have one more minute?
Oh, this is still on, that's it.
Yeah. So we'll go over some of the things you can do to afford college, and we'll start in this direction, counting towards the free or lesser expensive options. So things you want to keep in mind about paying for college is that bill is broken up with things like room and board, plus books and transportation. Those things add up, and those things are going to be a part of your financial plan, whether it's on that bill from school or if it's something that you're just considering. If that child drives, they still have to be able to find a way to be able to afford gas if they're going from far distances. If they're taking the bus like I did throughout college, you want to be able to keep in mind how much that's going to cost them. A lot of schools have a U-Pass that you can use, at least here, but that still can cost you money. I know UNH, we have to pay, I think we had to pay $40 a semester for ours in the last 2 years that I was there. Some schools offer it for free, some schools it's even more expensive. So that's something that they want to be able to consider on top of whatever they're buying for books. But when it comes to ways that you don't have to pay out of pocket per se, is going back to the academics, at least when it comes to scholarships like New Haven Promise, you want to make sure that they are in the best academic light to be able to get that money that they don't have to pay back, because those things add up. For me, I ended up with $3,000 back my first year of school because of the amount of scholarships that I got because my grades were so good. And then, things like grants from FAFSA, those things, so making sure that you get your FAFSA done. That's money that you don't have to pay back, that the student doesn't have to pay back, that can really cut down the cost of what your final bill is going to be. Summer and academic year work contribution from the student can really count too. My second year of school, I paid out $900 that I made myself. I didn't ask my parents for it. I didn't ask someone else for it in the family. I earned it over the summer, getting a good internship that I was able to get through New Haven Promise. But those things matter, and then those little costs that come up, like I pay for my books and everything, anything that, or those little things, I made sure I had a job that I could maintain, that didn't ruin my academics, where I could be able to afford those small things that can add up over time. Institutional grants and other scholarships, being able to qualify for the things that are merit-based with the schools that they're applying to, those things cut down your bill. And then when it comes to whatever that last piece is that is left over, you might get into student loans or parent loans. I remember from my senior year, I decided to stay on campus so I could focus on my thesis, and I did have my father take out a Parent Plus loan for me, but that was a last option. If I had a way to pay for it myself, I would have, but these things that can come first can really cut down the possibility that that will be a problem.
And the one thing I would note out is, these are the requirements of college. This is what the student chooses. They can choose to live on campus. The books will vary. They can choose to rent a book. They can choose to get an online book. Transportation, they can choose to use public transportation or to use their own car, whatever they like to do. These are the things that are more within their control. And the fees, there's no way to get out of mandatory university fees. University fees are university fees. Tuition, New Haven Province does contribute to tuition for students. 60% of our students at UConn actually don't take loans because they get a really good financial aid package with institutional grants. New Haven Scholarship Fund, which is a scholarship for students who live in New Haven. And then New Haven Promise, if they qualify for Promise. The Pell Grant, if they qualify for the Pell. And then a lot of them do an apprenticeship or a summer job that helps them cover that gap. And they don't get into that loan portion, or they have a contribution that's so small that they'll just pay it out of pocket. So it is possible. But it all starts with early habits and the FAFSA. So if there's anything you remember, is that it's financially possible.